Welcome to the podcast, Ella. It's wonderful to have you here. We've got a fun little history to speak of. I published a book of New Zealand home birth stories called Where the Heart Is back in 2013. And one of the stories in there is by a wonderful woman called Sally Whitaker, who happens to be your mother, and she is sharing your birth story, the story of your own birth, which is quite a story in itself. I'll kind of let you share about your birth story, but I'd love today for you to share about what your birth story meant for you in terms of the path that you went down around your own mothering journey. So, yeah, welcome, and let's hear you share perhaps about your birth story. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Thanks for having me, Carla. Yeah, I really love my birth story. Mum had a home birth with me. I was the first of four. And I was a surprise breech at home in rural Waikato. And like, yeah, we grew up looking at the pictures, hearing the stories. It was just such a normal thing in our house, like birth and all of that. I don't know how much more you'd like me to elaborate on that, but
yeah. Did you say you were the first of four or the fourth of
the first.
Yeah. What a first birth story for your parents to like have. So they were planning a home birth and you were born in the water, so a birth pool. Had an awesome, I'm right on that?
I think Mum got out of the birth pool just before.
Yeah, I think that might be right, eh? Yeah. And cared for by an incredible home birth midwife here in the Waikato, Maggie Banks, who I just have so much respect for. She actually helped edit my book and wrote the like the review or whatever you call it on the back cover. And she's a very special person. And she actually shares her version, her story of that birth experience as well, because as a midwife, it's kind of a big deal when you're, at a home birth and there's this, you're expecting a head to be being born and hi-ho, there's a bottom there. So I love that she shares it from her perspective as well. But yeah, I guess what might be nice to hear if you've got insights into it, if you've talked with your mum about it, what that experience was like for her, when she is told, oh, baby's coming bottom first.
I just want to point out a line in your book that I think is so funny. In the midwife's perspective, it says, and it's in bold, it goes, whoa, a purple anus.
Yes.
And I think it's just so funny.
Yeah.
And the other thing in Mum's story was like the vibe that I get is she was just so calm, like she was just having a baby, and as I think when the midwife realized I was breech, it sounded like, and this is just like vibes that I'm getting, it sounded a little, like a little bit like frantic, like I've got to call the backup midwife. Just that energy, I guess, of like, oh, like this wasn't expected. And Mum's just like, there's a line that was like, I just wish like the midwife had taken some of my like I was just having a baby and it was fine. And yeah, so like that was the feeling that I got through the story.
Yeah. So your mum was super chill. It's like, you got this, Maggie. Yeah. Don't worry, I've got this. Here, have a sip on my chill tea. Yeah, I wonder if it was one of Maggie's. I'd love to get Maggie on for an interview. I'm so going to have to do that. Yeah, yeah. If she will agree to it, bless her heart, she has done so much for midwifery and birthing in New Zealand and probably around the world, really. But yeah, I wonder if it was quite early on in her kind of home breech birthing kind of experiences, because she went on to become quite a an expert. It feels funny using that word, but in understanding sort of breech physiology and how to support physiological breech birth or vaginal breech birth with in the home or outside of the home. And she used to run training days for midwives, maybe even obstetricians, I'm not sure. But yeah, she was a wealth of knowledge around this, and she put out a book called Breech Birth Woman Wise.
Yeah, I have that book.
Yeah.
And I think it's dedicated to mum and us.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
That sounds familiar. I've got that book as well, but I lent it out and now I don't know who I've lent it out to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she wrote another brilliant book that I lent out and I have never had it returned. I need to buy more copies of her. Home Birth Bound, which is also a brilliant text.
Ah.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
It's a goodie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So what a story, like for your mum's first birth, and it sounds like she just took it all in her stride. And so you grew up hearing about this story?
Yeah. And then my brother was a diagnosed breech following my birth, and he was a home birth as well. And then mum had 2 head first babies.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just all so normalized, and yeah.
Beautiful. So fast forward to you, I guess, starting to entertain the idea of becoming a mum yourself, or perhaps you've met your man and you definitely want to have kids. What was your vision, or what were your ideas around birth for yourself, given that background, I guess, but anything else that kind of might have cropped up in your spheres with regards to birth?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure of like how each bit happened, but at some point I've always been really fascinated by birth and babies, and I always knew that I would be a mother. And so at some point I came across the Freebirth Society podcast and like binged on, all of, when you like find a podcast that you just love, and it was just like binged all the episodes. And in that time I'm not sure if that was like before I met my partner or like slightly after. But in that like similar time frame, I met him, and we talked about like I've always been, I think, pretty like just birth is a physiological, like a normal event, probably because of how I was brought up, and listening to those stories and stuff is just another thing that happens. Mm-hmm. And our bodies are meant to do that. And so I've always been pretty sold on the idea of like home birth and birthing at home. And when I was listening to the free birth stories, it just made so much sense to me. And I guess knowing mum's birth stories and knowing that we were breech, I felt like there could maybe be a possibility that I would have a breech baby. And so I didn't want anyone else making decisions around that for me, or feeling like I was being guided down a path that I didn't want to go down, if that makes sense. And I think there's like a wider like spiritual aspect for me too, knowing that birth works best undisturbed, and I'm quite a private, introverted person. I was just like, I don't want anyone observing me. It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. And so met my partner. We like talked about homeschooling and home birth and that stuff. And then while we were like, I took radical birth keeper school prior to getting pregnant, which was amazing. And I learned so much.
What does that entail? Like, is it how long is it for, and do you meet with, because this is the one that's run by the Free Birth Society?
Free Birth Society, yeah. So it was 12 weeks of another graduate has described it as it's like drinking from a fire hose. And it really is like that. You get like personal development tools, birth, like physiological birth information, birth keeping stuff, as well as like business support during that time. And it's a lot. Like good a lot, but a lot.
So it's both for kind of preparing for birth, but also teaching and preparing those who want to become birth keepers. So support, women who are wanting to birth outside the system, presumably.
Yeah.
Did your man attend that as well?
No. So I also, my partner is a farmer, and so his was a farmer, I should say, and his philosophy has always been like, and I know that you've I'm pretty sure in Tessa's episode her partner said something similar about the carving jack. And when I said like what preparation we did for birth, Alex was just like this, we got the carving jack ready.
What's the carving jack? I don't think I've heard of that.
Well,
here I ask.
I wouldn't know what it looks like, but I'm pretty sure it's, like to pull calves out of their mothers.
That doesn't sound like great birthing prep.
No. And he says that it's a complete joke. Like, but yeah. But he, yeah. I think the philosophy around animals giving birth is a lot better than like the medicalized system in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And so when your partner's watched a number of animals give birth, And that's the philosophy is leave them alone.
Yeah, they've got this.
They've got it.
Birth happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So how did he feel about your plans to pre-birth?
Oh, he was on board from the start and had no worries, much to my not I guess I wanted to talk to him more about stuff, but he was just like, nah, I'm not worried about anything. We definitely had the death conversations, because I think that's so important. And for us, what it came back to is outside perceptions, that we would be more, that he was more worried about people blaming me than actually about the scenario itself. Yeah.
Can I ask if I'm getting this right? What you're kind of saying here is that through that discussion around death and birth, you and your man, it's Alex, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. You and Alex had determined for yourself that sometimes death is a part of birth, and you were willing to, well, you accepted that as tragic as that would be, that is an inevitable part of some birth experiences. And if that was to be how it played out during your free birth, then that's something that you had, as much as you can do, prepared yourself for. But his fears were around, if that were to happen, it wouldn't be like, oh, shit, we made the wrong decision, and guilt and shame and blame kind of being laid down in that way, but rather how others would perceive that and what sort of flack you might wear for having made that choice and that being the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I don't think there's that many people who birth within the system who really have this discussion, who talk about, what if our baby dies? How will we feel about the decision making? And it kind of speaks to the bigger picture of handing over responsibility to the system, to the experts, and I'm using air quotes here if you're not watching but you're listening, because the experts in birthing bodies are the women's bodies, the women who have those bodies, right? But yeah, the perceived experts, that they hold all the knowledge about how to most safely get babies born. And so when a death occurs in the hospital, say, it's unfortunate, but at least everything was done. And I think there's this idea that if we do at least have, monitored everything and done all the interventions, and, then, well, it was just unfortunate. But actually, if we take a deeper dive into this, a lot of the problems, the harm that's been done to babies and to mums and to families in birth is a result of the interventions, interference, the fear-mongering, the pressures, the bullying, the coercion that is taking place within the system. So these kind of interventions and expert kind of opinions, pathways that are suggested or sometimes kind of just outright pushed upon people. They're done typically in the name of safety. You know, like, yeah, you're going, you know, 2 weeks past your due date, and so we need to get this baby born because there's an increased chance of stillbirth. So to save your baby's life, we need to induce. But there's very little consideration, thought, discussion had about the dangers associated with induction of labour, which I've come to know quite intimately through working in birth trauma support. I hear countless stories of how induction has caused fetal distress, has led to cesareans, has led to a lack of bond between mother and baby, breastfeeding issues, babies having to spend time in neonatal intensive care. So maybe not baby loss, although of course sometimes baby loss happens in hospitals as well. But it's a lot of potential harm that can be done to needlessly and to sort of try and give this idea that we can save every baby, you know, that's what medicine is for, and it's a lie. Yeah.
And like creating all of that trauma to save like a small,
Yes,
like, number of babies, or potentially.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't know the figures and I'm terrible with stats, but you know, say it's 1 in 2,000 babies that die of a stillbirth after 42 weeks. You have to do 2,000 inductions to save one life, you know. And if you think about the trauma that's put upon so many mothers and babies and families in those 2,000 inductions to save the one baby's life, it's you know, for some people that will be a risk they would prefer, but I think for a lot of us we don't consider it like that. And if we did, if we kind of had that fuller picture understanding, we might make different choices about what interventions we're saying yes to, and what risks we're willing to accept. And let's just be super clear that it is always the mother's right to determine what risks she feels most comfortable with accepting, because nothing in birth, as in life, is risk-free, right? There's always going to be risks, no matter how you're choosing to birth and where and with who. But it's the birthing woman who gets to decide which risks she feels most comfortable with accepting. And there should be a complete absence of pressure on her to make those calls. Yeah. What was it like for you preparing? Thanks for sharing about the discussion you had around death, because I think this is such a taboo, you know, and I think it would be incredibly rare for a woman to go through her entire pregnancy and not at least once contemplate, what if my baby dies? It's a natural fear we have at this, because it's such a precious and important part of our world and our lives, right? And this is why it riles me so much when people say, you know, why would she choose to free birth? Why would she choose to birth at home? That's just dangerous. Or she's high risk. Why is she, you know, not going to that doctor appointment? And it's like, well, you know, you have your perspective and your ideas around risk and around safety and whatnot, but you can guarantee that whatever choices she's making them in the belief that this is what's going to increase the likelihood of her having positive birth outcomes. So we do wise not to judge people for the decisions they are making around their births, and you know, if we can gently explore without judgment, we might just learn a thing or two. So I appreciate you raising that, because it is uncomfortable for people to talk about, and is one of those things, like many, I imagine, for those who are planning a free birth, where they do take a deep dive, where they do contemplate how they might navigate different situations and whatnot. Whereas I think for people who are like very much embedded in the system of birth, there is a lot less often self-work that goes on, like exploring their beliefs and learning about physiology and thinking about how they might like to navigate different scenarios that perhaps could play out. What if this happens? What if that happens? What would be important to us in those scenarios? So yeah, are there other things that you would like to share with us about your preparation for your birth? Whether there was particular boundaries you had to put in place? Did you seek any medical support? Did you? Yeah, like I would love to know what your preparation looked like.
My preparation, that was like most of it, I feel like most of it I had done pre-pregnancy with like the Free Birth Society stuff, like the Radical Birth Keeper School and the Complete Guide to Free Birth, like learning about birth itself. And so while I was pregnant, it was a lot of like walks on the beach and connecting with baby and just being with myself and talking with Alex and having those conversations. And yeah, the only thing I sought out during pregnancy was I had an appointment with a GP to confirm my pregnancy. So I took my first ever pregnancy test at 38 weeks pregnant. Yeah, for paid parental leave to get
Right.
tick boxes, basically.
Wow. Could have just sent a photo of your belly.
I know.
Wow, it's interesting, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need someone else to tell me that I'm pregnant, or to tell the system that I'm pregnant, because I get, well, yeah.
Yeah, in case you're making it up.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's the only sort of medical input you had?
That was the only, yeah.
Like, yeah. How did you cope without scans? Didn't you want to see your baby on the screen? Like, I know that there will be listeners who think that, oh, but like, that was such a fun, amazing time. Why wouldn't you have a scan? Like, if you know everything's going great, why wouldn't you just do that for the fun of it? Or, yeah, what would you say to somebody who says that?
I felt like there was too much risk in terms of the technology of ultrasound itself. Like, from the research that I've done, my understanding is that the ultrasound waves like heat up the tissues. And from my understanding, there've been no safety studies done on ultrasounds on fetal tissue. And that was, I didn't feel like I needed that. And the other thing is that there was no, regardless of the outcome of the ultrasounds, it wouldn't change like my decision making. So like if I had a low-lying placenta at 20 weeks, like I know that the placenta is going to move up and out away from the cervix. So I wasn't concerned about that. And if I found out that there was a chance that my baby had Down syndrome or another abnormality, like I wasn't prepared to have a termination. So I didn't need to know that information.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah. I love this, because this is what we need to be doing for every aspect of our pregnancy, labor and birth care, is with these proposed interventions, whether it's having a dating scan or having an anatomy scan or having the polycose test to test for gestational diabetes, or having a blood test, or like whatever it is, having a stretch and sweep. I think that having a vaginal examination, I think the question that needs to be asked is, or the questions, what information can be gleaned from doing this test, and how will we use that information? Of course, there's also the questions about the risks and benefits. Yeah, we will want to know that and what the procedure actually entails. But I think this is fundamental, is actually knowing what you are going to potentially find out when you do this test, and what are you going to do with that information. And I like the example you used with, if you have a scan and there's an indication that your baby may be Down syndrome, then what would you do with that information? And you already know you would continue your pregnancy. So is it actually helpful information if you're not going to do anything with that information and potentially take on the harmful consequences? I mean, I think back to when I was actually at Teachers College and there were two women who were training with me, and they both got pregnant at the same time, and they were both older mums, and one of them decided to, well, I think maybe they both had the nuchal translucency scan, which is a scan early on in pregnancy that measures the fold at the back of the baby's neck, which the thickness of that fold combined with the maternal age gives a particular figure for risk of Down syndrome. So it's not a definitive test, it's not diagnostic, but maybe you go from just based on age having a 1 in 500 chance to you have the nuchal translucency test and it says now you've got a 1 in 75 chance. So then they have this new figure to have to go, okay, well, what are we going to do with this information? And the next step is to have what's called an amniocentesis, which is where a needle is put into the uterus. Some amniotic fluid is withdrawn, and the amniotic fluid carries some of the baby's cells, and those cells are looked at to see whether that trisomy 21 exists, that chromosomal abnormality exists. So that's a definitive test. Well, one of these mums chose not to have the nuchal translucency scan. Oh, she might have had the nuchal translucency scan, but she chose not to have the amniocentesis. The other one chose to have the amniocentesis. And there's a 1 in 100 chance, a 1% chance of miscarriage with that procedure. As well, by the time the test results come back from that to say whether baby is indeed, it does have Down syndrome or not, the pregnancy is going to be, you're going to be like 16, 17 weeks pregnant. And so then if you chose to end your pregnancy, then you're giving birth, you are going through labor and you are birthing, a fully formed baby. And and so the other mum chose to have the amniocentesis, and she tragically lost her baby through that procedure. They had the test done, and baby didn't have Down syndrome, and then she had to watch her classmate kind of go through her pregnancy. And so I think this is really important, and we just completely ignore it, or it gets ignored when the midwife is handing over a form for you to go get that scan. These sorts of things aren't discussed in enough depth a lot of the time. Because if you're going to keep the pregnancy, is that information going to be helpful to you? And another one that kind of really sticks in my mind is about measuring the size of the baby. In late pregnancy, there seems to be more and more of these growth scans that are happening in late pregnancy. And it's like, okay, so if you get told by the scan that your baby is big, what are you going to do with that information? There's going to be a lot more pressures on you to induce. There's got to be a lot of more fear mongering around convincing you that this could well be problematic. Baby's shoulders might get stuck, you more chance you'll need an episiotomy or forceps or whatever. Like, there's all this kind of talk will come into your field. If you believe that you are a healthy woman growing a healthy baby, no matter its size, then yeah, why would you have a scan that's could potentially tell you you've got a big baby that you're not going to want to do anything about anyway? If you believe that you're well designed to birth your baby and whatever size your baby is growing is just the perfect size for you, yeah, why would you go and have that scan? Why would you? But people do, because it's a scan and I want to see my baby, or because the doctors told me that's the safest thing to do, or my midwife did, or my friends and family. So yeah, this is what I mean by that self-work, right? Like, you've got to really unpack your beliefs around who's responsible for your birth care, for your pregnancy and birth choices, for the outcomes of those choices. That's a big one. What are your beliefs around the safety of birth and where birth will happen most smoothly, most safely, with most reward? Lots of things. There's lots of things we can unpack. Are you a people pleaser who struggles to say no to, especially to authority figures? Do you feel really uncomfortable with rocking the boat? What boundaries might you need to enact if that's the case? What do you need to practice doing lots of in your pregnancy? These are all things I talk about in my Soulful Birth course. Yeah.
Okay. And it's not to mention the inaccuracies of
Mm.
scans at that
Mm-hmm.
gestational point.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the number of women who I've worked with now who had that scenario where they were encouraged to induce because of a big baby, and found on scan, and the baby was a perfectly normal size. Yeah, and I say normal, I mean, I think big babies are normal too. I don't my first two babies would have been considered big, but they didn't feel or seem big to me, like they were just healthy babies, healthy, chunky bubbas, thriving babies. Yeah. There was another thing that I wanted to say there. What was it? Nah, it's gone. It might come back later.
I was going to mention that I think a lot of people feel like they can, I don't know, but I feel like when you hire a midwife, you think that they're going to like inform you about all of those things, or like educate you about. That's not really the way it is these days, is it? It's just like these routine things that you do instead of like actually figuring out what's best for you.
Yeah, I have to agree. I believe that there are some unicorn midwives still around who will take the time, because this is about time, really, the time that's required to really get to build a trusting rapport with the women they work with, who take the time to talk through options, to just sit and listen to, perhaps this woman has had a past birth and she needs to share that birth story in its entirety, and that might take an hour, for her to share her hopes and her fears and her desires, and like to have those conversations, and to cover all the, okay, you know, this is what's usually recommended at this stage in pregnancy, is having, you know, the polycose test. Let's talk about what that test entails, what, you know, risks are potentially associated with it, what we would do with the information, or you could do with the information if you were found to be outside of the normal range. Like those conversations, they take time. They take a lot of time. And I'm not hearing of many women these days whose midwife appointments last more than 20 or 30 minutes. Yeah. Ella has a stunned, open-mouthed look upon her face if you're not watching the recording but just listening. Yes, with just a little couple of sentences about, you know, and the sort of tick box kind of notes, records. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked with a woman once who was under private obstetric care because she had a traumatic first birth when she was under a midwife, and so she wanted the best care with her second pregnancy, so paid for the best care, you know, air quotes again, because obstetricians, they're awesome for you know, the births that genuinely need intervention in order to get babies safely born, but that should be a you know, the small exception, not the kind of norm that it seems to have become. So, and she described, I said, oh, so what's a typical antenatal appointment like for you then? And she said, well, I'm under an obstetric team of 5 different obstetricians, so I see a different one at each appointment. And she said the appointments last 5 to 10 minutes. They feel my tummy, take my blood pressure, pee on a stick, and then they give me a scan form or whatever, and I'm out the door. And I said, okay, and when you go into labor, what would that scenario look like? And she said, well, I go into the hospital and whatever staff midwife is on would care for me, and then they call whichever one of those 5 obstetricians is on duty to come and be with me when I'm close to pushing my baby out. Yeah. It's like, so we talked about different types of midwifery care and different birth options. She ended up birthing at home and having an amazing home birth via her obstetric team, and has since gone on to have another home birth. Yeah. And she was 34 weeks pregnant when she got in touch with me, so we didn't have much time.
I love stories like that though, because I often hear like, oh, it's too late to like change, or and I'm like, no, it's not. It's never too late until you're like giving birth, or you can fire your midwife or whoever during labor. I mean, arguably it's going to be harder during that time, but it's never too late.
Yeah. Yes, and for women who are like, oh, I wouldn't want to upset my midwife. She's so nice. I don't want to, you know, like I feel bad. It's like birth is too big, too important for you to, you know, to not follow these instincts that are saying she is not a good fit for me. I don't feel safe with her. You know, you got to have those. They will feel like hard conversations for people who aren't used to saying, who are used to being people pleasers and that, but it's too important. How you birth impacts you for the rest of your life, you know, and so have those hard conversations, make those tough choices if those are what feel right for you and your baby. Just, yeah, you don't want to have regrets after your birth and say, I wish I just listened to that voice in my head that was saying she is not the right fit for me, or oh, I should just stay at home and birth, or, you know, shouldn't ask my mother-in-law along to the birth, or whatever it is, you know. yeah, those we've got to become really adept at tuning in to our body wisdom, our instincts, our babies, because most of us are really out of practice with this. It's something that's kind of driven out of us from a young age generally. So, and it does take practice, you know. So yeah, we do well to practice doing that in pregnancy and listening to those intuitive hits and acting on them. Was that something that you said that was talked about, discussed, or like yeah, in the Radical Birthkeeper School?
Yeah. Definitely, like, I have to go back, but definitely, like, the biggest thing I think I got out of Radical Birthkeeper School was like trusting women regardless of the, like, just implicit trust for women and the choices that they make. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything else you want to add before you share your birth story with us about any preparation, any challenges that you might have been met with either internally or externally during your pregnancy?
One thing I did want to touch on was, and I don't know because I have nothing to go on, but I feel like I had quite a quiet baby in terms of movement. And that was something, you know, like, I'd had a few people around me pregnant, like before, well, you know, like while I was pregnant and before I was pregnant, sisters-in-law, and you'd like feel the baby kick and stuff. And not like, some people did get to feel it, but it wasn't as like, or maybe I was making, like, maybe I was just one of the few people in other people's pregnancies, I don't know. But I didn't feel like it was like, as, it wasn't like, oh, like baby's kicking like all the time, and it was quite subtle. I don't know if it was the way he was positioned, or because I don't know. I know that he came out head first, but I don't know how he was positioned beyond that. But that, I think, was quite like neat and drawing, like, for me to be able to go further inwards, like taking a breath, like if I felt like I hadn't felt movements in a while, like asking baby to, like, I just need some reassurance, and taking a pause to like tune in and pay attention, because like we can get so busy in our day-to-day lives that I'm sure it's easy to like not notice the sensations when they are occurring as well. And that could have been something that was happening as well. But yeah, like, some of the movements I remember being quite like just really little and subtle. And there were some big ones, and like I could tell he was moving, but it was more like his position rather than like a big like boof 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 like kick. Yeah.
So that kind of coming back to sinking into trust, like this is him, this is his way, and I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that cropped up for me was like the mental, I was a bit, I don't want to say anxious, but it definitely crossed my mind about like handling, I'm doing air quotations, like handling the sensations. And what if I get in my head, or what if I think that something's wrong when it's not? Or how will I know that something's wrong?
Mm.
And I listened to a podcast that was, I can't even remember which podcast it was now, but it was a free birthing mum talking to her husband. And I think it was her husband likened it to going to the gym. And like, you're sore when you're working out, like your muscles are sore, but you know the difference between working out sore and I've injured myself sore.
Mm.
And that was something I was like, oh, that's such a good analogy, because everyone understands what, like, the difference. Everyone can relate to that.
Mm.
And yeah, I will know if something's really wrong. Yeah. And I say that, and I did hire a virtual doula when I was quite late on in my pregnancy, 36 or maybe even more weeks pregnant, because I was like, if I do like spiral mentally, I just want to have someone that Alex can call, or we can call if we need to. Like, I don't want them to be able to come to my house. I don't think I want someone. And we had, I guess it's good to talk about like what we had lined up as like options. Like, I was prepared for like a 3-day, 4-day labor. And I was like, if that happens, like, who could come and feed us and take care of house stuff and things. So we had a friend who was prepared to do that for us. And yeah, and I hired this doula just for some reassurance. Yeah.
I'm interested to hear, when you share your story, whether you utilized her or whether it was just like a safety net for you, I guess, a comfort, a reassurance that she was there for you to call. So yeah, do you want to share your
Yeah. I want to mention, so Oakley was born on a Tuesday, and on the Sunday, I don't know why this is the term that they use about the mucus plug, but my mucus plug, people usually say I lost my mucus plug. I'm going to say my mucus plug fell out, came away. While I was on the toilet, I'd just been to the toilet, and it came away like on the toilet paper, like I saw it, took photos, as you do.
Yeah.
And I remember that being, when I think about it now, I'm like, oh, that was so, like, I was just like so blasé about it. Like, I wasn't feeling any sensations. It was the only like indication. I think I was 41 and 6 when he was born. I think. Yeah, but when the mucus plug came away, it just like was whatever. Like, I know it could still be days or weeks away, so it's just a thing.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to the Monday night. The Sunday night, I'd been so hungry. Like, I'd gone to bed, we'd had dinner, I'd gone to bed, and then I was so hungry again. and I think I just had some snacks. But on the Monday night, we'd had dinner, we went to bed, and then my partner, like, we had like a little picnic, like, in our bed before we went to sleep.
That's a bit cute.
Yeah. Because I was just like absolutely starving.
Yeah.
And then we went to bed, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, I got up to go to the toilet. And as soon as I stood up from the bed, I'm really glad my waters didn't release in our bed, because that would have been a pain. But I stood up and my waters released. So I went to the toilet, and I put a pad. I might have been wearing one of those adult diapers. I might have put one of those on. And I think I told my partner, I wish I could remember what he said, but he just rolled over and went back to sleep. I was like, it's not like it's nothing, but my waters have broken. And then I lay down and tried to go back to sleep. But as soon as my waters had broken, like, I could feel the sensations. And I couldn't get comfortable. And so I was kind of, I tried, like, I was like, I know I need to like keep resting, because this is just like the early stage and who knows how long it'll be. And then I just laugh, like, looking back on it. Anyway, at 4, so yeah, between 1 and 4, I was kind of sitting on the seat trying to like rest, maybe sitting on the toilet. And I think they were definitely getting more intense, because at 4 o'clock, I asked Alex to set up the pool. I was like, don't fill the pool, but I want you to blow up the pool, because I'm feeling like this is getting intense. And in hindsight, it was.
It wasn't.
It wasn't. You know, well, like, I feel like it was just like a classic, not a classic, I don't know, like, when you don't know what the like peak experience is, you don't know like what you're aiming for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, yeah, like down here felt intense at the time.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what the like top of the mountain
Yeah.
was gonna feel like.
Yeah, it was above the clouds, and you thought it could just be there, but it was actually
yeah. So yeah, so 4 o'clock he set up the pool, and then at 6 o'clock I asked him to fill up the pool, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm really thankful that we had 2 hot water cylinders at the time. And I just labored all day. I was like in the pool, out of the pool. I would have like rests on the bed, and like, I don't know how long they were, but like I felt like I went into a really good sleep until like the next contraction. I could not lay down while I was having a sensation. They were way too intense. And I sat on the toilet a lot, and that really helped as well. And I just labored like between different like places in our room, getting in the pool, getting out of the pool, laying on the bed, leaning on the chair, leaning on the end of the bed, sitting on the toilet. Alex would like, refill the pool, bring me food. I didn't really want to eat. And I'll answer your question. There was never a time that I felt like our doula was great. she like checked in with us and would offer Alex like, you know, like, has she eaten, or like, are you like offering her drinks? Like, it was just like, and he would say, yeah, like we're doing all of that. And but there was never a point that I felt like something was wrong, or there was never, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And something else I want to mention here is I never feel like I never felt like I got regular contractions. Like I had an interesting pattern of like a strong one, and then like a couple of smaller ones, and then like a lot, what felt like at the time, I don't know, like time is just warps when you're in that space. I feel like motherhood just time warps the whole thing, like pregnancy, birth, labor, postpartum,
Mm-hmm.
children growing up.
Yes. Yes.
But especially during that day of birth, like, but yeah, I felt like I had like a strong contraction, and then like a couple of small contractions, and then like a longer period of like rest before another like big contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the pattern like all throughout the day. And so yeah, I was just laboring like that. And I remember having this like thought process, like, I'm just meant to surrender. I'm just meant to surrender. And like, I don't know if it was like, I'm just meant to surrender, and then it will be easy, or then it will be like pleasurable, or then it will be, but it was just like, I'm just meant to surrender. I'm just meant to surrender. But then it was like, I don't know how, like, I don't know how to surrender to this. Like, this is hard, so much harder than I thought it was going to be. and I don't know how. And I guess at some point I must have just like let go of that like thought process, which I guess might be a form of surrender. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just labored like that all day, eating kiwi fruit, drinking water, having some coconut water. And then at about 9 p.m, 8 or 9, I don't know, I was like, had the classic like transition crisis point of, I said to my partner, I was like, what if I really can't do this? And he was like, oh, I've been waiting for this. I was like, fuck you. You don't know, like, you don't know what's going on. And I was in the pool at this stage, and I think it was about this time when I like tried to feel, because earlier in the day, like quite early in the morning, maybe like 8 or 9 o'clock, I'd asked him to like see the purple line, like if I had the purple line. And I don't know how far it actually goes up, but he was like, yeah, I can see like the purple line. And I was like, oh, cool. Like that must mean like I'm close. Like maybe I'm close. Anyway.
Just for listeners, the purple line up from the top of your butt crack extending up is a sign that the baby's head is getting really low and putting lots of pressure on down there. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for and so that was early in the day, and then we're at 9 o'clock at night, and I was like, oh, what if I really can't do it? And I felt inside, and I think there were a lot of times when I was like, didn't think that I could feel anything. Not like his head just wasn't. I think I was wanting to feel his head like right at my opening. and I still felt like I could put my fingers inside quite far.
Yeah.
And I was just pushing and making a lot of noise and screaming during contractions and pushing really hard. Like, it felt really hard at the time. I mean, it was what my body was doing. It wasn't like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, and then it felt like, and then his head was there, and then like the ring of fire was like, I was like, oh, this is the ring of fire. And then it kept getting worse every like contraction and every like little bit that his head would like come out. I was like, I thought I knew what the ring of fire was, and then it like just kept getting worse and worse until his head was like until his head like came out. And when his head came out, I like reached down to like touch his head, and I don't remember pushing at all, but like then by the like I was touching his head, and then his body just fell out, and then he was in the water, like kind of tangled in the cord. And I like untangled and brought him up out of the water. And Alex says that it took him a little bit to cry, and like in my memory he just cried as soon as he was like out of the water. And Alex also reckons it took me ages to like have a look at his sex, and like let him know, which is really funny. But I don't think it was that long. I think it's been traumatic. But as soon as he was, he cried in my memory pretty soon after he was out of the water. And by that stage in the evening, I think the water was pretty lukewarm. And as soon as I'd like discovered that he was a boy, I was like, all right, let's get out of the pool. And so I got out of the pool and sat down on the chair, and we had enough time to like take a photo. And then I had like another contraction, and I was like, oh man, I can't do this. I can't like sit here with these, like it's too much. And we had a mattress on the floor with like a tarpaulin on top of it, and I like put Oakley down on the mattress, and I was like on all fours, and I told Alex to get me a bowl, and I didn't really have to like do anything. Like I felt like the placenta just fell out.
Awesome.
I like went to like give a little like pull on the cord, but it really just like fell out. And then
how soon after Oakley was born did that happen, do you think? Time frame?
I want to say it was only like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It was pretty quick. Yeah. And then Alex was holding Oakley, and this is the time when I'm like, the immediate postpartum is the time that I'm like, it would have been nice to have someone there that was not just Alex and I, because you've got a baby and a placenta. And then I wanted like, I was just like, I just want someone to like wipe the blood off my legs and go to the bathroom and get me the adult nappies and make us some food. So I went and got nappies and like sat down and put that on, and then Alex brought Oakley back, and then he went and got me some food, and then we moved to the bed and we did a little cord burning ceremony, and then we all just like snuggled in bed and went to sleep. I wish I could say that I went to sleep, but I think I was like so high on adrenaline at that I don't think I slept for like 3 nights after.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you feel when you first collected Oakley into your arms, brought him up out of the water?
Oh, like it was just so like normal. Like I didn't have any like over. I was like, oh, thank goodness, like this is over, because like that was really hard, but also like just so normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when did he first try to feed? What can you share anything with us about his first breastfeed?
Oh, this is an interesting question because I don't remember. I think it might like we might have lay in bed like side lying, like as if we were going to sleep, and like our breastfeeding journey has been really easy. There has not been like I didn't even have sore nipples. Like I made myself a beautiful like nipple cream, and I didn't even have sore nipples at the start,
Wow.
which is like unheard, like
Yeah.
nearly unheard of. um, but yeah, so I don't actually remember his first feeding, but I think it might have been like side lying as we were about to go to bed, or it might have been in the chair when like before, like when Alex was getting us some food.
Mm.
Not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you mean you went recording his pre and post feed weight and panicking if he hadn't been at the well latched for at least 20 minutes or like oh, you know, I just so love how you've depicted through how you've shared, but also through the lack of what you've shared, just how freaking normal it all is, you know. Like just yeah, like I could come back to that. Birth happens. It happens. Birth work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we have a birth like that, where we have just been completely guided by our instincts, our bodies, our babies, then we're just so beautifully primed to know how to, well, to trust that breastfeeding will work and to kind of, you know, and sometimes, yeah, people will need help and stuff. Like you were a bit of an exception to the rule in terms of no nipple pain, and maybe you're going to have people contacting you after this saying, can you make me some of that nipple cream, please? I will pay you a shit ton. But I do also think that that may well be in part because of everything that came before the breastfeeding, because you weren't all up in your head and getting stressed out. And you know, I have this interesting story of my own actually around breastfeeding my first baby. So she was born at home, and uh, she, yeah, she was feeding well, like getting plenty of milk. She was a big baby, but it was really, really painful for me. And every feed, she was doing more damage to my nipples. She had a tongue tie that, you know, she's 24 now. And back then, they didn't used to kind of advise snipping them and that. And so I kind of knew she had this tongue tie, so it was a bit more of a challenge to try and get a good latch. I was a midwife at the time, and I knew all the signs to look for a good latch and all that. But needless to say, every feed was excruciating, and I would have to psych myself up for it and get all my pillows sorted and kind of take some deep breaths. And sometimes I'd have Panadol before a feed because I was just like, you know, it was just so hard and painful. And then when she was 6 weeks old, I was asked to go to the Waikato Home Birth antenatal series and go and share her birth story with the group, which I was really keen to do, but I was really anxious that she might need to feed while I was sharing the story because of this whole need to get myself prepared mentally, physically with cushions and this and that and the other thing. I went along to do this talk because the midwives who were running it were like, we'll cuddle her, she'll be fine. But you know, I'm just getting started on my talk, and I can hear Laura is needing me, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm just going to have to feed her. And so I just kind of didn't get too in my head about it. It was like, oh well, this just has to happen, and I've just got to get on with this, and put her on. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was the first time she went on without any pain. And it was from then that it started. So that stopped any further damage from happening. So 6 weeks of continued damage, and then it was another 2 weeks of no damage that my nipple started to heal up. But I just find that quite interesting, quite a remarkable story, in that I think there's something in the psychology of expecting it's going to be painful, getting myself all worked up, preparing with all the cushions, versus we've got this, it's going to be okay. And it was, like anyway, interesting story. But I do wonder if your breastfeeding journey was so smooth sailing, in part because you had just primed yourself so beautifully, you and your baby, to like trust that you've got this, and it's going to work. And yeah.
And babies are meant to feed just as much as we are meant to give birth.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we wouldn't be here as a species.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
Oh, what a story. That was awesome. How did Alex feel about the birth?
Pretty stoked.
Yeah.
I think he would describe the day as boring.
Yeah.
Except for the running around filling up the pill, but yeah.
Does he share the story with others? Is this something he's kind of proud of, or is it like,
no, it's definitely something that he's proud of. And like, I think he likes to use it as like a shock factor. Like, oh yeah, we had a home birth, but there weren't any midwives. Like, we just did it at home by ourselves.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I love that. What do you think? Is there anything that stands out for you in terms of what you have learned about yourself through this journey that you've taken into motherhood in this sort of way?
I guess it's just a deeper like trust in myself and my knowing and my intuition. And that
which is no small thing. I mean, having deep trust in ourselves and in our intuition guides many aspects of our life outside of birth. And it's such a key component of responsive parenting and decision making around our children, and giving them a really secure base from which to grow and feel connected to their world. What would you say to anyone who's listening who's like, I want an empowering, wonderful, undisturbed birth at home, but I'm fearful of something going wrong, if I don't have a midwife there, what would you say to them? Because I think there's plenty of people who are like, I want a home birth, but without a midwife, like, that just feels too dangerous. And yet there is this narrative of like, but I keep hearing that, midwives can sometimes be the ones who end up messing with the birth, or interfering when they shouldn't, or something like that.
Yeah. I think like in a real emergency, there's always like medical support is always available to you in an emergency if you need it. You like, just because you're choosing to give birth at home doesn't mean that you can't access medical support when you want it. I think that was a big one for us. Like if anything turned into an emergency, that's why we have ambulances in New Zealand. And also, I think that's it. You can access medical support whenever you want it. And I guess it depends what you value. Yeah, like we've talked about through this whole episode, like what's your risk tolerance? What's your own definition of safety? What is the most important thing for you? Because only each individual woman can answer those things. Yeah.
And I think such a big one is who is responsible for this birth and the outcomes of this birth. And I think it's a really, really scary thing for a new mum or mum to be to do, to say, I am the one who is responsible for this baby and the outcomes of this birth experience. I'm the one who's responsible for making the decisions around what interventions or screening tests or maternity care I do or don't access, etc. Like that's all up to me. That can feel really, really scary because of course there is this massive fear that what if something happens to the baby and I've missed it? What if something happens to the baby because of a decision that I make? What if something happens to the baby because I chose not to do X, Y, or Z? And that's scary. But what we don't kind of, I think, contemplate in the same way is, what if I hand over all the responsibility and then there's outcomes that I don't feel that comfortable with or that are bad, and I'm left with a sense of, why didn't I just say no? Why didn't I listen to my instincts that midwife wasn't a good fit for me? Why did I hand over all my power and responsibility? So there's that, right? Like there's, yeah, if something goes wrong in your birth, it's gonna suck. It's gonna be really gutting. But at least when you are making the decisions, you know how much thought, energy, contemplation, going through the learning, whatever you needed to do to make those decisions. And you made the best choices at the time based on that information and support you had available to you, because nobody more than you wants a safe and positive outcome from the experience, and so yeah, I get it. People can feel really overwhelmed, like this feels like too much responsibility, and it feels easier to shift that to the perceived experts because this is too scary. But the moment we are growing a baby in our womb, we are responsible for that baby. I mean, when your midwifery care ends at 6 weeks postpartum or whatever, and there's no midwife coming or doctor coming to answer your questions or to guide you around, what to do when the baby's doing this, that, or the other thing, or whether to send your child to school or not, or whether to, you know, give them this vaccine or not, or what foods to start them on and when, or should I be feeding them? Oh, they've got a temperature. Is it too high? Do I actually need to get them seen by, you know, in the hospital? Do I need to give them paracetamol? Or is this normal? Like these, there is a billion and one decisions you are going to have to make on behalf of your child until they're at an age where they are no longer dependent on you many years after you conceive them. And so I think it's the responsible thing to do, and a really helpful thing to do, to start practicing taking on board that full responsibility, preferably before you get pregnant. You know, preferably it's a really conscious conception. But if it hasn't happened before you get pregnant, then as early on in your pregnancy as possible, start practicing reminding yourself that you are responsible for the decision making around this pregnancy, this birth, this baby.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to say is that like even if you're choosing to birth outside the system, it doesn't have, like, you can still access non-medical support. Like there are lots of, well, I actually don't know if there are lots of, but there are there are doulas, there are birth keepers, there are people out there that want to support you in your birth outside the system. Yeah, it's what you would like.
Yeah, Ella, you, I know, are one of them. I see you run some beautiful like online groups. Share with us about those and any other tools or resources you'd recommend to anybody who's like, oh yeah, I want to learn more and see if this could be the path for me, or I know I want to go down that path and I want to like get some community around me and do some learning.
Yeah. I run a free birth circle once a month. It's for free birthing mums, women trying to conceive at any point on your free birth journey. I believe that you can't, it's never too early to start preparing. So if you want to come and you're not yet pregnant, come along. Yeah, and I just see it as a co-created space. There's lots of opportunity for questions. It's mostly what's on top, like what arrives at that call. It's community space to hear from women who have free birthed and to ask questions from other mums who have like walked the road. I kind of see it as like the circle where you can come to gain like advice, wisdom from people that have walked the path before you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and in our last call, it was really beautiful. We had the conversation about death, and one of the ladies was like, you know, there's no other spaces where this is like a normal, there's no other pregnancy circles where this is like a normal topic of conversation. And I think it highlights the level of responsibility that we are taking as women that are choosing to free birth. So that's what I do.
What night and time is that on?
It's on the second Tuesday of the month at 8 p.m. and it's online. Yeah, so anyone can come.
I'll put a link in the show notes for that event, or for your Instagram page, or some way for people to access that circle.
Yeah. And what was the other thing? What other support?
Yeah, are there any other, like you've mentioned Free Birth Society, podcasts that you listened to, you binged a lot of those, and I do hear a lot of people say they get a lot of value from listening to the stories that are shared on the freebirth podcast. Is there any other tools or resources that you would really suggest?
I did the complete guide to free birth, which is really helpful. It goes through like all the what ifs and stuff, and yeah, but there's probably loads of books and stuff, but I also like really trust that the information that we need, like, it's another one of those follow your intuition. Like, you'll be guided to what information you need and what support you need and what just like all of it, like what inner work you need to do. And you don't, like, I definitely don't feel like you need to learn all the things. I think like your body knows how to do it without you having the intellectual knowledge of birth. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. Yeah, if anything, there just needs to be some unlearning, really. Go on. The any learning that you've picked up throughout your life that says birth is dangerous, that we need the experts to tell us how to safely birth our babies, that sort of thing. We need to unlearn that and come back to trust that we are women, that we are animals, that, you know, mammals have had 65 million years of evolution that mean that birth is inherently safe and efficient and rewarding. And yeah, coming back to just sitting in trust that that's going to be us as well. And if it's not, if we are one of those small fraction of the population that needs medical support, that our body will let us know that as well. And of course we'll listen to that.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. I've loved this chat so much, Ella. It's Friday morning. It's really dreary here, and I just feel completely lit up. Getting into the weekend, it's like I've just been at a birth.
So good.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, and for the work that you are doing in providing these circles. I think that is just so nourishing for a community that isn't huge at this stage. In New Zealand it's not anyway, but I've no doubt that it's going to grow and grow as you know, there are less and less safe options for women around birthing at home, and having a care provider who feels a really 100% safe and comfortable fit for them. So so awesome. Go you, and thank you.
I also I don't know if this is going to be like I've also been thinking about getting my partner to do something for dads, but it's a very like not yet gestated idea. It's just the start. We might,
Was there anything like that came through the Free Birth Society that was an option? Something for guys?
Not really. Nah.
Is your circle that you run just for women?
Just for women, yeah. At this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what what we want to do for that, but it's definitely a consideration because there's definitely nothing out there for men.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to this and you're thinking my man would really appreciate something like that, or I would really appreciate my man attending something like that, and I could probably convince him if Ella's Alex's
Give me a
comment.
DM so that I have to create something.
Yeah, so if you're thinking that, get in touch with Ella. All right, there'll be a way to contact her in the show notes, and get in touch with her and let her know, because yeah, I think that sounds like awesome. That would be great.
Yeah, cool.
Beautiful. Well, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, Ella.
Thank you so much, Carla.
This has been really special.
So nice.